Good afternoon. My name is Elena Rokou, and today I'll try to take you through the complex world of benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. Let's start by taking a second to think about that and how did Tom Sati came up with the idea of that? Well, I bet that you have already seen here and there the SWOT analysis. And in a SWOT analysis, we talk really about strengths, characteristics of the business or project that give it a strategic advantage over others. We see the weaknesses of the projects that place the business that you are analyzing or the project at some kind of strategic disadvantage in relation to others. Then we have our opportunities that are elements in the environment that the business or the project could exploit to its advantage. And in the end, we have the threats that are elements that could cause trouble for the business. So a SWOT analysis, it's a way of summarizing the current state of a company and helping to devise a plan for the future, one that employs the existing strengths, addresses existing weaknesses, exploits opportunities, and defends against threats. Now, what about benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks? It's a bit similar, but at the same time, it gives you a little bit more to work with. In most decisions, it's really possible to identify the factors that offer benefits or opportunities. And it's also pretty easy to define where costs will incur and what kind of risks we can expect. The factors are usually best evaluated by grouping those that influence benefits together and similarly grouping the opportunities all together, costs and risks. This is done through something that we call a system of control nodes. See, the control of the model. The BOCR nodes are control nodes with networks beneath them. So although you have probably seen before AHP and ANP models, the BOCR is really a way of combining different models, analyzing using multiple networks. Each of the control criteria nodes in turn will have a decision subnetwork containing the real alternatives of the decision, but we'll see a little bit more about that in a second. The BOCR models are used to make decisions by considering the benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks of the alternatives. And these are really two different aspects from which a decision can be viewed. What are the factors that affect the alternative's desirability on one side, and what is the impact on the decision maker's long-term strategic objectives? So if you want, you can say that you have a micro and a macroscopic view of the problem. The strategic objectives of the decision maker and the long-term goals that they have is one side of the decision, and the other side is objective. You could use it in any real company, and it refers to the actual benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. And here's a nice comparison. Benefit is what strength is for the SWOT, because benefits gives you the short-term gains, like the strengths will give you the origin and the helpful items to achieve your objective. Opportunities are the long-term gains. Costs will be losses that you are incurring on the short term, while risks are really threats in the long term. So they are events that we are not sure that are going to happen, but they are going to happen in the future, a little bit farther ahead compared to the cost. The main top-level network contains the BOCR merit nodes, so benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. There are 4 second-level subnetworks, one for each of the BOCR nodes. They contain the control criteria. And then, attached to the control criteria nodes are the third-level subnetworks at the bottom of the model. They are the alternative subnets. each must contain a cluster that has the alternatives. And the final step, or sometimes if you prefer the first step, is to add the strategic criteria to the top level network. A model like that would look something like BOCR main networks is our first level. In our second level, we have the control criteria hierarchies with benefits, opportunities, cost, and risks. And in the third level, we have the alternative subnets. Now, thinking about this setup, let's go and try to analyze the exact structure that a BOCR network ends up having. And that would mean, bear with me, excellent. So, what have we seen so far? That a BOCR network has a first level. At this first level, you can see your goal, and you can also see your strategic criteria. The strategic criteria are the factors that really help you tailor the decision to the long-term goals of your own company and organization. It's the place that all the subjectivity of this decision-making process should be really focused. I use the strategic criteria to end up with a decision that my company can follow in the end. It's not the objectively best solution, it's the solution that fits the current situation and the current set of decision makers. So we will have the strategic criteria, and we'll have a few of them. We could even go and create a full HP structure at this point if we thought that it will help us add all the strategic criteria that we want. And this would be one part. Then we would move to our second level. Our second level has the benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. And you can actually think of it as 4 parallel lanes, 4 different aspects that you're going to analyze your problem. Under benefits, we see what we call control criteria. Well, these control criteria are simply the perspectives that you want to break down your benefits for the benefits. And you are going to use different control criteria, or potentially different, really, for opportunities, costs, and risks. And what we will have. Well, I would say that now I have my perspectives. Let's call them P1, P2, and P3. I might use some that are common between benefits and opportunities or any other. Let's say that P1 is common for all my perspectives, but not all of them match. Not even the number of perspectives needs to match. So for my opportunities, I'll have 2 different perspectives, and the same for costs. And, you know, sometimes it happens that costs and risks might have the same perspectives or not. We're pretty free when we decide. At this point, I think that it's wise to evaluate your control criteria. Why? Because if I find out that one of these control criteria concentrates just a very small percentage of the total weight, for example, I have P1 with 60% of my priorities and P2 with 39.5%, while P3 ends up with 0.5. Well, I think that it's pretty safe at that point to say that we do not need to analyze the third perspective. We can stay with the first two. But if they have normal, well-adjusted and weighted percentages, we can obviously keep all of them. And I would do this evaluation for all my perspectives. At this point, I would be able, for each of my perspectives, to create either an HP or a full ANP network, where is the first time that you will see my alternatives. And I need to create a different network for each of them. So in my case, I would end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know how to count. 11 bottom level networks. I have one bottom level network for each control criterion that I decide to keep in my model. Well, that's how it would look. And that's the initial idea of how you structure your model. Don't forget that today our focus is a little bit more on how we do the calculations and a little bit less on the actual BOCR conceptual structuring. However, for the purposes of this workshop, we are going to use a BOCR model that you can find it online on our Super Decision site. And the model is about the University of Pittsburgh. Let's see a little bit more about the setup of this model. So at the first step where we define the problem, what's our problem? We have the University of Pittsburgh that has faced some losses of state appropriations, and even more right now that the tuitions need to decrease in, we need to decrease the amounts of tuitions. A lot of students are thinking it again with a new format. We have a lot of changes happening at the university. And the problem that we are trying to solve is whether the university should move to a privatized version or should stay on its current status that is semi-public, state-related. So defining the alternatives, we have either to privatize or to remain as it is, that is public. At this step, where you define the alternatives, you want to be very sure that you have clearly defined your alternatives and their profiles, because the more details you collect at the beginning about your alternatives, the easier will be the process of pairwise comparing, but also of defining the different factors that you need to take into consideration. Next step is to define the strategic criteria. As I told you at the beginning, the strategic criteria can be worked on either at the very early stages of your model or at the end. They are a little bit independent than the rest of the BOCR, with the meaning that they represent your subjective perception of the problem. So the strategic criteria show you the decision maker's point of view. That's their job, and that's what we need to help them do. So in order to find strategic criteria, we want to look into the beliefs of the decision maker, the mission, long-term goals, short-term goals, anything that could show us what's the real perspective of the decision maker. What are the core values of that organization? Because that's the way that you will be able to define what you need to do. For example, for the university, really important is obviously the economic well-being, the university ranking, the quality of education, the continued enrollment, and to be really good at the research level. And having the strategic criteria, we can really turn page, start working on the objective part of this decision. I want to define the control criteria, or like I would say in math, I want to find how to break down the forces that affect my model. So talking about control criteria is really talking about the different perspectives that I'm going to analyze. In other words, I'm asking myself, having the benefits of actually analyzing the benefits of privatizing the university. Let's take one of the two alternatives. All right, what kind of benefits can I think of? I can think of some financial benefits, some political benefits, and probably there are a lot of benefits for the students. Well, let me think. Now, taking the other alternative, taking the alternative of my status quo, what would happen? Well, again, there are some financial benefits to that too, and I have some political benefits, and definitely students have a lot of benefits from keeping the status as it is. So yes, I think that the control criteria, the perspectives that I'm going to analyze will be financial, political, and students. Let's go, as we talk about this, to define our BOCR model. And it's always good if you can make kind of an initial definition by hand, just because it helps you analyze and collect all your thoughts in one place. So in my new model, my goal was find out whether we should privatize or not. All right, first step done. Then my strategic criteria or objectives. I said that I would like to think about the economic perspective, economic well-being, the university ranking, the quality of education, continued enrollment. A university without students kind of dies, so that's pretty important. And this is a university that always cared about the research. So this will be part of my strategic objectives. Now, my next step, as we said, is to define the control criteria. And we define control criteria separately for each of the merits. We don't need to have them the same for all. And I can have for benefits, as we said, financial, political, and we also want to have in the mix our students' perspective. Similarly, for the opportunities, I will have the financial and the political, and for costs, the same. While for risk, I think that I should put in also a social perspective. Am I done? Is this my model? No. For each merit, I will need to go and create a full network, AHP or ANP, for each of my control criteria. And that sounds kind of difficult, right? To have all of these criteria at once and create so many networks. And sometimes scares us off. Actually, it's not that hard. First of all, when you break down a problem, the bottom level networks are very simple because you have already come down to a very specific little niche that you have to analyze. For example, when I'll go to the financial network over here, I'm really asking you, what are the expected financial benefits of keeping the university public? And this will give me a set of criteria. And what are the financial benefits that I'm expecting to receive if I privatize the university? And the third thing that I need in that network, what are the factors that will help me decide which of these two options is better? And that would lead us to our super decision model. So if we create all the bottom level networks, we'll then be able to see in super decision our full model, which today, because we don't have much time, I have already created for you, and you can find a tutorial on how to create it on superdecisions.com. So here's my network. Look, the model structure. This model structure over here is the most important part of your BOCR structuring, is the way that we are going to go through the different places. Now, my main network contains the goal and the strategic criteria. Just that. No connections whatsoever with the benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. Sounds weird, but that's how it works. Now, for each of my merits, so for benefits, I'll find a control criteria goal, and inside my 3 control criteria. For each of the control criteria, I'll have one AHP or ANP, this is an ANP network, a simple one probably, where I have my alternatives. This is the first and the only place that you will see alternatives, the bottom level AHP or ANP networks, plus some factors or some actual benefits of the 2 alternative solutions. For example, we see here that we have budgeting or overall income in the financial benefits of the alternatives and different ways of utilizing that budget. If we go and see the bottom levels, you will see that we have one network for each merit and for each control criterion. Now, that would give me a structure like this. Over here, I show you the full levels for my benefits, where I have my control criteria and my bottom level networks. This is another way of representing exactly the same top level view, so our main network. And here we are, starting to calculate. First step, pairwise compare your strategic criteria. What do I want to end up with? What strategic criterion is the most important of the university, the second most important, the third most important for whoever is your decision maker, the university over here. And what did I find out? That they care a lot about the university ranking and the level of research, and of course, that's pretty close with economic well-being. While the university, the quality of education and the contingent enrolled are there, but might not affect this decision as much as we could initially expect. And here is a full-blown analysis of what factors are we using under benefits. I have my three perspectives: control criteria, financial, political, and students. And under that, I have my factors. For financial, budgeting, overall income, and utilization of resources are the factors that will help me deciding what alternative will provide more financial benefits, or better, or more important. For political, I have the state governor and whether they are Democrats or Republicans, and the state assembly with the same. And for the students, we have education quality, like class size and professors' availability. And from the other side, to balance out, I have the financial perspective, like tuition, the ability to give student aids, or the total cost knowledge. Opportunities, a little bit smaller. You see control and research under financial. For example, we see opportunities there getting being influenced by the federal government, or how some different opportunities on how to define the student admission plan, or the ability to do classified research or public research. At this point, where you have found out all your model and you have already pairwise compared the strategic criteria, you start working with each of your BOCR networks. And what do? For each merit and for each control criterion, you do pairwise comparisons, all of them. Or if you need, you can use some shortcuts, like picking only the first line and one for each consequent group. But this is not our goal today. So let's focus on the way that we are going to use these pairwise comparisons, and how are we going to combine our results. Well, we synthesize the results bottom up until you get which alternative provides the most benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. And at that point, you can go to the ratings of the main network at the top level. Ratings, did we talk about ratings? Well, yep, we are talking now. When you have finished with the rest of your model, you are going to create a top level ratings model where the criteria, the strategic criteria, will be the columns of that ratings model, and the benefits, opportunities, cost, and risk will be the alternatives, the rows of the model. Where benefits, although you will be seeing in my model the word benefits, and you need to use it because it's a keyword, you will need to, at the same time, have in mind the most beneficial alternative. And for the opportunities, you will need to have in mind the alternatives that provide most opportunities. Or for cost, the most expensive. Be careful. Pretty often when we handle cost, we try to have the highest priority to be given to the least expensive object. In BOCR, that's not true. In BOCR models, the most expensive alternative needs to have the highest priority. And the calculations are the part that will explain us why that happens. Well, the why is that the final step to combine the BOCR is using formulas. And we have two formulas that we usually use. The additive negative formula, that is generally best for long-term results. And it really reads, take the results from the benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks subnets. These are the BOCR in that formula. And take also the priorities that you get from your ratings model, idealized really, and combine them. How? Multiply the ratings value times the actual value from the subnet and add it if it's benefits and opportunities, subtract it if it's cost or risk. And that's why in BOCR, I want my most expensive alternative to be the one with the highest priority, because in the formula, I'm gonna use the negative sign. And the same goes for the risk. The most risky alternative, I would like to be the one that has the highest priority in BOCRs. Similarly, when I use the second formula, the multiplicative formula, I can have a kind of a marginal cost benefit analysis, and it's usually best for short-term results. In that case, I'm going to multiply the benefits times the opportunities divided by costs and risks. And again, as you see, the cost and risk get to be inverted. So the rule of having the most expensive item as the one with the highest alternative still works for this second formula. And talking about the results, let's see how you actually build them bottom up. So here is my full model. Let's assume that my full model right now has all the pairwise comparisons in place. So we're ready to start combining the results and understanding what's the situation with my results. How do we do it? We said bottom-up approach. That means I'll go to benefits and I'll go to my financial. That's the farthest down that I can go in this model, right? At this point, I'll just open an Excel spreadsheet and I'll start combining my work for benefits. So I'll start working with my benefits now. How? Computations synthesize. Be careful, not the whole model. We care about the financial benefits. I'll check that benefits financial is the title over here, just to make sure that I'm taking the correct one. I'll copy the values and I'll bring them back over here where I'll say financial. I'm leaving some space because I need also the weight. And here we are. These are my two alternatives. I'm going to put them over here. And I'm going to take the normalized values. So for now, my first results say that for the financial, from the financial benefits perspective, privatizing is the best option. I'll repeat the process for the political network. Here, I'm in the network, and then I'm going to synthesize. As you see, I just keep the values that I need. And I'll repeat the process for the students so we can see at least one level done. I'm taking the values for this option too. Just cleaning up. Here is my students. Now, what I'm missing the values that I'm going to come and put over here, which will be the weights of my financial, political, and student control criteria. How I'm gonna get those? I'll go back to the benefits level over here, and instead of synthesizing, I'm going to judgments. Always hide the left side panel. I'm going to copy to clipboard the financial, political, and students. It's a button right down here. And take them with me in my Excel spreadsheet. And I'm going to use them over here. Now, how do we actually calculate the overall results? At this point, it's a sum product, really. That means that I'm going to multiply the first weights, the financial, political students, by each of the privatized sections. Similarly, I'm going to do for the second alternative. And let's make the number just a tiny bit more readable. And let's take the value from super decision. Mind that obviously we will have a tiny difference. I'm going to synthesize now at the benefits level, answering to the question, which alternative solution is the most beneficial? And here are the results that I got. As you see, we are pretty close. Not exactly, because we didn't really have all those decimals that super decision can handle. However, we got the same results. And that gives me that the most beneficial solution for my situation would be to privatize. We would need to do the same exact process for opportunities, costs, and risks. But let's skip that stage so we can see how do the calculations go. So over here, we have already done the benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks, always following the exact same process where you go to the bottom level, financial, for example, opportunities, synthesize to get your values, then go to the bottom level, opportunities, political, synthesize again, take the pair from the judgments panel, the weights for the financial control criterion and the political control criterion, and then either sum and multiply or use the sum product in order to calculate the actual values. And what do we have now? That the most beneficial, that gives the most opportunities, very costly and very risky, is to privatize. On the other hand, by pairwise comparing the strategic criteria, and let's go and see where do we get the results for the strategic criteria. I'm going to go over here to my super decision to get the strategic criteria values this time. Here we are. If I am at the main network and I go to judgments, I will be able to see my strategic criteria priorities. And also, if I go to the ratings view, remember that I told you that we have a ratings model? Yes, at the top level over here, I have added all the strategic criteria as columns in my model. And over here, underneath the name of the column, you can also see the priorities. That's another way. If I take this ratings table to the clipboard, I will be able to have all the values that I need. Notice that these are the strategic criteria and their weights. Over here. And being in Excel, it's pretty easy to see what we were talking about, which one of the strategic criteria was the most important one. University ranking and research were the most important ones, followed very closely by the economic well-being. And although I don't need the totals for my calculations, I do need the priorities. And these priorities show me that the highest priority is given to the opportunities presented by the solution. A good question at this point is, how do we really enter values in this rating? And although it's not exactly what we're trying to do today, let me just tell you that when I see the ratings table and I see the word benefits, what I put in my mind is the most beneficial alternative, which was to privatize. And I'll say, the benefits that privatizing will bring to the University of Pittsburgh, how do they reflect to the economic well-being of the university? And how do they reflect to the continued enrollment? How are they going to affect the university ranking or the quality of education? And that's how I get my priorities and the values over here. Having all these values already calculated, I'm ready to see the final results. And as we mentioned, we have two different formulas to use. Design standard formula, additive, negative, will give me my long-term results. And it says, keep it public. And then design, standard, additive, probabilistic, multiplicative over here. We are going to get our second set of results, and let's see both sets of results, one next to the other, so we can compare and understand what happens. Here are my strategic criteria. Here is my set of ratings results. And here are my two different formulas and the results that they give me. as you see, although the numbers are not the same, the bottom line decision is keep it public. And the question is, how did we manage? Why we were rating everything and we had most beneficial privatize, most opportunities privatize, costs and risks, again, the most costly and risky to privatize. How did we ended up with public? Well, a lot depends on actually the ratings. And the other thing is how the cost and risk that, although they have privatized, they are negative for our overall result, affect and get balanced out by the benefits and opportunities. And over here, the huge cost and risks that are related to the privatizing, relate to the privatization of the university. And this is the perspective of the decision maker, of the group of people that were deciding, overrules what they had as benefits and opportunities. So the trade-off leads you to say it's better to keep it public, because although there are some benefits and opportunities, the costs and risks involved with privatizing are really big. And this will give us the final results. Now, the sensitivity analysis for this kind of models, it's a whole story by itself, but let's keep in mind that being at the top level, and only when you have the additive negative formula, you are able to set up an AHP sensitivity, because the top level is an AHP model, and you can define your independent variable in such a way that you can work and find, with respect to the benefits in the main network, that is the first one, how the values change. For example, over here, we see that as the benefits priority increases, the best alternative becomes more and more obviously the privatization. And while the benefits priority lowers, the public university, keeping it as it is, becomes a better solution. Similarly, we can see the effects of changes in the priorities of, for example, costs to the model. And you see that whatever the cost priority is, the situation will not really change, maybe even slightly in the very beginning, but in most of the cases, the best alternative from a cost perspective is to keep the university as it is. That shows that people that were doing the model were evaluating that the cost to set it up are actually higher than the cost, that the profits that would be incurred by having a private university. And that was all from my side. Do we have any questions?